Welcome back to the Fierce Freedom Podcast. I'm Kat Morgan.
And this is Joyce Orth.
Thank you for joining me, Joyce.
My pleasure.
Yes, it's always a pleasure to be with you here. And yeah, today we have a really special guest joining us, John Demay, all the way from Michigan. So you're joining us from Marquette, is that right, John?
Good morning. Yes, Marquette, Michigan, on the South Shore of Lake Superior in the most northern part of Michigan.
Oh, just a beautiful area, right?
Very beautiful.
Yeah, Lake Superior. So John's going to be sharing his story today, and we just want to give to like just a trigger warning for people listening that this episode is going to be dealing really heavily with the issue of sextortion, and just along with that as well is going to be suicidal ideation. And so if that for you is really triggering, we would just say maybe take a break from this episode. But we feel that this is so important that we are talking about this because, as we said before recording, John, sextortion has virtually exploded. Like it is something that is affecting, so countless people, countless youth, boys and girls are being targeted because of this. And so really what you're going to share is just your son Jordan's story today. So could you, if we could just get into this, John, can you share how your life was forever impacted by sextortion?
Yeah, I'll start kind of just adding to what you said here first about how it impacts youth. And thank you for having me too. And we really appreciate it because without you folks and media outlets and podcasters and influencers and law enforcement officials and all your organizations we'd never be able to reach as many people as we do. And the listeners are extremely important to this mission and Jordan's legacy. So, I want to say thank you for that. And thank you for listening.
Thank
But
you.
it is a problem. Sextortion, it's a thing, it's a word. It's an actual criminal scheme that takes place. And to your point about how broad it is, in my travels and speaking events to law enforcement groups and such, it's really an epidemic. And some detectives and federal agents are really ringing the alarm because it's not just thousands of teens, it's literally millions. And some investigators are telling me it's literally affecting just about every teenager from the age of 14 to 17 who's on social media. Those crazy, weird friend requests that you get from some nice looking young lady from wherever, those are most likely scams. And that's the very beginning of how sextortion starts. That is an attempt. Whether that person, that user accepts the request or communicates with that person, sends money, sends pictures, sends information. It just depends on how far down that rabbit hole you go, all the way up into including taking your own life over this, in which my son did. So it's such an epidemic because as soon as that request goes out to you, that is the beginning of sextortion. So literally every teenager online is probably not, if it happens, it's going to be when it happens to you. So we want teenagers to be aware that it's happening and to know and to recognize it so they don't go down that rabbit hole. And we can get into some of those other stories that I know from families around the world that have gone down that rabbit hole, even knowing Jordan's story, knowing Jordan personally, and still falling victim of these things. So with that said, Jordan was my only son. He was oldest. I have two other girls, 10 and 8. And 2 years ago, March, we were poised to leave for a 2-week Florida vacation to just to be hanging out with the family. And on Thursday night, Jordan, my son, he was 17 and a half years old. He was 8 weeks from his 18th birthday, just getting ready to graduate high school. And he received a text message from a young lady, friend request in Instagram, named Danny Roberts, nice looking young lady. He accepted the request at around 10:15 at night and started communicating with her. Simple communications. Hi, how's it going? Where are you from? What do you like? What are you into? What's your school? Your sports, your this, your that. Over time, the relationship started gaining information. And by around midnight, Jordan had been convinced to send a sexual picture of himself. And he was enticed to do that. And he was leery of it. He even questioned her as a scam. And he sent the picture. And as soon as he did, he realized it was a scam. And from that point on, from a little after midnight, he was extorted. It's high pressure, no room to breathe. They made him They were negotiating money to make it go away. He was begging for them to stop it. He was asking why they were doing this to me. And the negotiations happened. They ended up settling on $300. Jordan sent that to him through an Apple Pay, and it still wasn't enough. They kept going. They kept pressuring him. They never gave him any time to think or stop to analyze what was going on. And by this time, we're at 2, 3 in the morning, and he eventually told him about a little after 3 a.m. that morning that he was going to kill himself because of you. And the extortionist said, "Good, go ahead and do that anyway. Do that now, or we're going to make you do it." And at 3:45, he shot himself in his bed.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And that
I
was
woke up.
one night that happened.
Yeah, it was one night. Last time I saw him was around 10:15 when he was coming from his mother's house to my home for the night because we were traveling the next day. I ran into him in the patio outside, said, "Hey, I'm going to bed. I got to get up early. We got a long drive." Said hi to him briefly for 2 seconds, and he had just opened up that message and started communicating with that girl. And that was the last time I'd seen him. So this entire thing played out while I was in bed sleeping.
Oh gosh.
It couldn't really be more horrific. And to
My
think
home,
that families go through this now.
Mm.
yeah, I mean, in the old days, right? I'm 44 this year, and my parents growing up, the only thing I had to worry about is the candy man, right? Don't take candy from strangers, stay away from the white van with no windows on it,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And my whole mom's hand in the grocery store. So we ran around town, bikes, and be home at dinner time and when the street lights come on. And that's just not the reality anymore. We almost don't even have to worry about that as much. We have criminal cells that are all the way across the world that are committing these crimes online and using social media to do it. And it's happening in the middle of the night when I'm sleeping. I live in a small town. I've never locked a door in my life here. I leave money and wallet in my car. My car is unlocked outside right now. I've never feared for any of that. And here we are, a victim of the most horrendous thing that you can imagine.
Yeah. That's so important to talk about because I think that there is this idea too of like not my kid syndrome, like this wouldn't happen to my kid. And you had said that
Correct.
in the beginning, like millions of victims
Mhm.
and more
Yep.
every day. And it's just the tentacles of this have reached into like really safe neighborhoods and homes. So I think that when people have this idea of like that wouldn't happen to me, I don't need to really worry about this. I think that your story proves that completely is false.
Yeah, and a lot of those folks, and I was probably one of them, to be honest with you. Um, these extortionists, it's all planned. And so in our case too, we had our case ended up the very high profile, and the extortionists were in Nigeria. They found 4 men in Nigeria. They the FBI tracked them down. They worked with Nigerian EFCC agents, and within about 8 to 10 months, they had federal indictments for 3 of those 4. They actually served those warrants overseas, arrested 3 people, and 2 of them were extradited back to the United States. Ended up going through preliminary hearings, pled guilty a few months ago, and actually were just sentenced to 18 years in prison just 2 weeks ago, right here in my hometown of Marquette.
Wow.
Which was a very big deal. The third indictment is still in Nigeria. He's fighting his extradition. So it could be a year, it could be 10 years, and it could be never. So we're still waiting on that. Subsequently, the others involved were tried in Nigerian courts and held in Nigeria. I believe maybe they might have even been minors at the time. And then an update to the case is just 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, the FBI circled back into the money side and followed the money and arrested 5 American men for money laundering charges related to Jordan's case. So when Jordan paid the money, it went through money mules in the United States, it converted to Bitcoin and then transferred overseas and then deposited into Nigerian accounts. Those men were all Americans out of Atlanta area in Birmingham, Alabama. So
No words.
yeah, and
It's a
so when we
web.
start
Oh,
talking about that
God.
thing, this case is a $300 loss to Jordan. So if Jordan had not taken his life, we would have filed a complaint to the FBI. It would have been a $300 loss, and they would have threw in a statistical chart somewhere, and it never would have been touched again. In reality, our detectives were able to take this thing, run with it, get the FBI involved. Their team ran with it. Everybody was on board. The law enforcement work was tremendous, and they had almost 11 arrests here, I believe, total, and hundreds of victims. Over 130 victims. Our small group of extortionists, these young guys. There were 4 college kids basically sitting in a small flat in Nigeria, middle class Nigerian men.
John, I'm not sure. It's really hard to listen to this, and yet it's such an important topic. And I don't know if you said, were they extorting his friends list as well on the social media platform, or
Not yet.
was
So what
that
happened?
not part of it?
Well, that's not typically part, and we can get into some of those details as we go through this. But in Jordan's case, they made one mistake, and a lot of families, there's dozens of families that have lost their loved ones to sextortion specifically, and I've met most of them. And we're friends, and we communicate, and we discuss this stuff. But the unique thing, and I want to circle back to kind of what you said about, being safe in your home, because a lot of these young men are specifically targeted. So our group of extortionists learned how to do this on YouTube. There's a criminal group called the Yahoo Boys. They specifically built content to share to other extortionists on how to do this. They had complete manuals, scripts, how and when to do it, target markets, everything, and it was on YouTube for years. So our group of extortionists, these young college guys, were easily able to Google and YouTube and get information from these coaches, basically. And so part of that is young men who are handsome, are sport athletes, high school prom kings, and the more popular kids, because those are the young men who kind of have the persona of losing everything. And that's the way Jordan was. Jordan was extremely handsome. He was 6'2", 185 pounds. He was an all-conference basketball player. He was a star football player. He played baseball. He was very popular in school. He had a very diverse group of friends. And that was a perfect target, because when they get into your mind and they start running these scripts and know what to say and when to say it and how much pressure and when to put it on, they make you feel like your entire life is over. Now backtrack yourself into your 17-year-old brain and
Right.
try to evaluate that pressure and think,
Right.
oh my God, my life is over. My
Mhm.
girlfriend's going to break up with me. The whole community is going to find out about this. All my classmates are going to find out about this. I'm ruined. I'm over. But the deep breath, and we step back and we realize that that's not reality, right? As
Mhm.
adults, as a 44-year-old man, I can tell you that. I mean, I don't even hardly remember what happened in high school, let alone, thank the Lord, I'm not still with my high school girlfriend, right?
Right.
And just everything works out for a reason, and that wasn't my life at all, and certainly wouldn't have been Jordan's life. He had so much more. He would have, even if the picture was exposed, he would have moved on and had a family and went to college and got married and bought his first house and all those things, and this would have been a blip on the radar. But they don't have the capacity, right? That we don't have that
Right.
mental capacity until we're well into our late 20s, and so that's what I try to tell the kids. But kind of back to your point about the kind of victim target market, that this is kind of where it is, and that's why Jordan was such a good pick for them, really. And to your point about the picture being sent to others, typically that's not their motive. They don't want to send the pictures, because once they do that, really their leverage is over, right? So they need to create a maximum pressure campaign without actually releasing
Oh,
anything to
yeah.
get them to do something that they need.
Mhm.
And for men, it's
Right.
money, right? So that's what their target market is. Our Sextortion group was there to make money. When it comes to women, to the ladies, to the young girls, they're being targeted for pictures. And what I like to tell young ladies listening, and parents that have young ladies on social media, is it's not just about the naked pictures. They want there's groups of criminals that all they're out there for is to gather pictures. And so what they'll do is they'll go on to, say, your web page or your Instagram page, and they're going to pull off your headshot, just a simple headshot. and then they'll pull one off with you smiling, like with your head tilt, and then they'll find one with a little lower cut shirt, and then they'll find one from 2 summers ago when you're in your bikini, and then they grab those, and then once they decide to target you, then they will try to get the nude stuff from you. So then they'll try to get you to send like a topless photo or a bottomless photo or a butt photo or whatever. And then they take all those photos together once they get that, and they sell them as a package to groups like ours, who then use them against the men.
Mm.
So it's quite a thing. What I'm learning is a lot of these
Wow.
criminal organizations are doing their own niche type market
Yep.
type of thing. And the FBI is seeing a lot of the progressionary photo sets, because they're valuable to somebody, because when you're extorting somebody, you can say, oh, hey, here's Joanne and here's your picture. And then, oh, you're cute. And then a couple minutes later, oh, here's me over here smiling. See, it's me. And then as the conversation gets a little more sexual, then she's showing, oh, hey, look, what do you think of my shirt? And then they show them the little low cut shirt. And then they show them this shirt. And then they show them the topless. And then they entice them, hey, this is my topless photo. Let me see you topless. And then the boy sends them a topless photo. And then she'll show them a bottomless photo. And then let me see your bottom. So that, they're communicating back and that
Mm.
forth until they get those photos from the men, and then boom, it's money. So all the while they're using some young girl's Instagram photo set, and she's locked out of her account because it's hacked. So
Wow.
that's kind of how it happens in a nutshell. And it's very fast, and it's very easy to get wrapped up into it,
Yeah.
because
Mm.
parents don't understand that young people communicate sexually online now.
Right.
Nick Mick had come out with a statistic that said 40% of 14 or 17-year-olds said it was okay to send pictures to another person, whether it be a boyfriend, friend, girlfriend, whatever. So almost half think it's okay. And 25% of that half have already done it. So statistically, about 25%, 1 in 4, 25% of young teenagers are sending pictures to other people for whatever purpose. So when parents sit back and say this isn't happening, yes, it is, because they aren't going to the basketball game and meeting their significant others and their little high school crushes. They're communicating on programs like Snapchat, where messages disappear and there's a lot of sexual content that's happening there, and you're never seeing it, and here we're hearing about it. So
Mm-hmm.
parents are saying, how can somebody send a picture of themselves? Well, that's how, because they've probably been sending pictures to their girlfriend for 3 years already, or 4 years, and you haven't known about it. So when some other random girl comes into the mix, it's not uncommon for this to already be happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I think parents need to understand that it's just a little bit of a different dating environment and how things actually play out in the real world. So
I totally agree. I think this is something I've thought about too, is that our culture and these apps in a way groom kids before they ever get to it all works in tandem. Like you were saying, the sextortionists are working together to get these photos to add legitimacy from these girls, and then they're
correct.
using that to target the young men. And so it's like it's all working together in a perfect storm. And so yeah, I think you're right. It's like we need to not be sleeping. We need to be awake to this and to see that this is really the reality. And I know that Instagram now, I think that they have made teen accounts private or something. So like there's
Yes.
some things, but gosh, I mean teens are so smart and there's
Yeah.
so many workarounds. There's all these private apps and
Yeah.
like GitHub was something that we just posted about because it's a
Mhm.
nudifying app that Microsoft
Yes.
has and
Yep.
it has not taken any actions, any safety protocols in place that you
No.
can just again have a picture. You've never even taken a nude photo and we have the technology to then
Yes.
nudify a person, a woman
Yes.
actually. It's only women at
Yeah.
this point, but
Yeah, it's such a great point. There's so much to unpack right there, because
oh,
we could spend an entire weekend just talking about the what's coming up. We're dealing with this at a micro level right now. It's almost acute, but it's an epidemic already at an acute level. Once AI technology brands to the Nudify technology, and we don't do something to slow this thing down or stop it, then we're all in really serious trouble. And
mm,
I know there's federal legislation that I've been trying to work on at the federal level with that, like the Shield Act, specifically kind of forces it's basically legislation that doesn't allow you to take your picture and put it on somebody else's body. And that's what's happening, for the listeners. What nudifying is they take your picture off your Instagram account, and then they go into Pornhub and find a porn star that's naked, and then it superimposes your face onto that body, and then say, and then extorts you for the money with it. They'll say, hey, I made this nude picture of you, and you say, well, that's not me, and they're not going to care because they're just going to tell you, well, nobody's going to believe you. So, but I'm going to send it out unless you send me $1,000. And so there's a lot of legislators and a lot of Americans that are trying to put an end to that now. And I think it needs to happen in kind of make your facial features and picture proprietary to yourself. So you can't, kind of like a copyright type of situation. So there's things that we need to be doing now immediately to prevent that for sure.
I'm so glad that you're helping to promote that kind of legislation, because it feels like things are happening so quickly, and we do need to be thinking ahead, because these traffickers, these abusers, they are utilizing technology at such an alarming rate. And I feel like legislation feels kind of slow too. So let's get it passed. And also, I think these tech companies need to be held accountable as well, for their platforms that are being used. There needs to be more protections. But I'd be curious what you think. I mean, what else you think, and also like what you want to see happen from this, and then kind of how do you speak to parents about it, and like what are some important reminders? So
Yeah, I guess I'll start from the beginning. I ended up here because we live in a small town, about 30,000 people. And when Jordan died, I'm a real estate broker here. I've been here my whole life. Jordan's been around. He has a ton of friends. So, I mean, everybody kind of knows everybody here. And so when Jordan died, everybody was absolutely upside down. Like, what happened? There's no way this happened to this young guy. There's just something isn't right. And so after day 3 or 4, when all this came up, so what happened is the extortionist sent the picture to his girlfriend, which is rare because we talked about that a little bit earlier, because they typically don't do that. And so when they sent that picture to his girlfriend, they were going to try to extort her as well. And thank the Lord they did, because that was the evidence that the FBI needed to go and get a search warrant to preserve the entire transcript of what happened that night on Instagram. So when you type stuff in Instagram, it's there forever. In Snapchat, you might be deleted off your computer or your phone and off your account, but they have copies of all that, and they can get a full transcript of that at any time. Now it takes evidence and search warrants and judges to do all that in the court systems, but in our case, that one piece of evidence is what unlocked that transcript. So after day 3, when Instagram sent the transcript, because Jordan had deleted everything off his phone before he died, so at surface level, everything was copacetic. Instagram sent the full transcript. They read it, found out what happened, notified us, and said, "This is what happened to your son." And we were blown away. We're like, "Oh my Lord, what is this?" Right? And so that immediately our thought was, we have to let everybody know that this is happening. They're trying to extort Kyla, and who knows, his other friends could be involved. We have no idea if this is somebody from the high school or if it's somebody from Nigeria. We had no idea at the time. So we went public with it with the sheriff's office. They encouraged us to do a press conference with them, or press release, which we did, and said, hey, some evidence was discovered in Jordan Demay's death. And, we believe it to be a sextortion case, and we wanted to let the public know. And then the ball started rolling immediately. Local news picked it up, then regional news, a few outlets in other states picked it up. There was one of the bigger criminal TV shows had picked it up and did a small segment on it. And then really what happened, it kind of went dormant for a little bit. And then when the indictments were released and that went public, then it blew up. And that's when big media started reaching out, and it started snowballing. And so here we are today. And now I do a lot of public speaking. I'm in, consulting for NCMEC and doing all kinds of great things and getting parents aware, and trying to do the awareness piece. And that's kind of where we started with this. Was in the very beginning was just, hey, we need to let people know this is what happened to Jordan. It can happen to you. If it literally, I can sit down for 20-30 minutes and tell you how much restriction I had on Jordan's phone. And we had every single app, every single GPS locator, parent control through Verizon, through Apple. We had a separate router in my house that was on a timer. He didn't have access to
Wow.
mine. I mean, I made him sign a contract when he was like 11 years old,
Right.
to use his phone. He was only allowed to communicate with contacts only. So all this stuff was happening. And so here I am, a victim of this thing, but we did everything we could do to mitigate things up front, and we're still here. Um,
Mm,
so to the parents, this is the stuff that we have to watch for, and it's getting worse and worse and worse as we go on. It's getting more advanced, and they're getting smarter. And so now there's a lot of things like on social media that need to change. And this is the message that I try to tell parents, is that social media is not a place for teenagers. If you really want to be a really good parent, you need to keep your kids off social media until probably 17 at least, 16, maybe 17, if not till 18, really. Your 14-year-old has no business on social media. Zero, nothing, none.
mm,
I'm sorry, you don't want to hear it. It's hard, but they have no business on there. Mine will never be on social media, and they're going to try to get workarounds, but you need to be a parent and stop that and do everything you can to keep them off. They're going to give pushback, but you just need to be strong and do that, because there's so much danger. It's not just sextortion, it's body shaming. It's completely warping young people's minds and what they should and should not do and look like and act. It's unacceptable. There's really nothing on Facebook that's positive for a young teenager at all.
no.
So let alone being subject to nudity and sex trafficking and fentanyl and sextortion schemes and all the things that are happening in there. It's just not worth it. And I tell parents, if you're comfortable letting your 14-year-old wandering around in a strip club for the evening on Friday, I guess maybe social media is probably okay for them. If you're not, then probably shouldn't be on social media. And to be honest with you, I'd probably rather have my 14-year-old in a strip club. You know why? It's because they're controlled there. There's bodyguards there. There's rules there, right? And so none of that is in place in social media. It's wide open, and young people have access to the entire planet with whatever they want in the palm of their hands. And you're giving that to them in the privacy of their bedroom at midnight when you're sleeping is a bad recipe.
Yeah.
And so, other
Well
than
said.
keeping your kids off social media, I think it's important to keep the technology out of their hands after 8, 9 o'clock, and put away in your bedroom in another place. They should never be on their phone privately, enclosed in their bedroom or basements or attics, or wherever they're hanging out, forts. It should always be out in the open. They should never give the access to the world to your children in their bedrooms privately while you're sleeping. It's not a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that we've talked about this documentary, The Social Dilemma, but just how that came out in I think 2020 or so, and just
Yeah,
it's showing that it's basically been the kids that have grown up in this environment of just access, unlimited access. It has just done a number mental health wise and in every
right.
single way. And I've even seen statistics that show physical crime has actually decreased, and people think, oh, great. It doesn't mean that crime has been eliminated. It's gone online. I think that that's where it's gone. And I know that you're former law enforcement as well, so I'm not surprised that you had like those protocols in place, with your son. But I think that's a really good wake up call too, because we do encourage phone contracts and prevention and preventative measures. But I think there really does need to be kind of a really tough approach and really not trusting these apps and really it's designed to be the most addictive it can be. It time and money is what these app developers have designed it for. And so don't trust that. Like you need to put those protocols in place in those measures, because no one else is going to do it, and you can't
No,
trust those external forces that are out
no.
there.
In social media, they believe that your child at 13 years old is old enough to have the account. That's their
Mm,
idea of somebody that's capable, right? And we all know that's not true. And so there's already been proof through whistleblowers on Facebook, and I've seen the emails that they're trying to get users younger and younger and younger, because they want them to get addicted essentially. And so they want them to become users as soon as possible. So they're lifelong users. So when they become adults and we're dishing ads to them, that the users are going to buy products through the ads, and that creates more ad revenue. So social media runs their entire ad program on user count. And that's kind of a big problem, because like a publicly traded company like Meta, who is selling, you know, billions of dollars in advertising packages to Walmart and Target and all these other things. They're saying, look how many users we have, and we can put you in front of all these users, and this is our data. And then they collect the money from the advertisers. They use technology to push those ads to the users. And then they go to their shareholders every quarter and say, look at all the money that we're making for you based on all these great numbers and all this user count that we have. Well, the reality is their user count is really fabricated and false. And so if Facebook were to go through, or Meta, essentially through Instagram and Facebook, would go through and clean their house of user count, they would probably lose about 60-ish% of their user count, because 40+% we're guessing is fake or fraudulent or duplicated accounts. So they couldn't do that because they'd end up going to prison, most likely, because they're reporting to their shareholders that all these user accounts are
legitimate.
producing all the income, and this is why our
Mhm.
business is so good. So I think they'd have some challenges there. There'd probably be a lot of lawsuits filed if they cleaned house. So I think they're staying away from that. And also on the backside, they don't have to, because Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which was written in 1996, says that social media companies have blanket liability. So they don't have to be held accountable for anything anybody says or does on their platform, because they don't know who they are, and we can't control what other people say. So in 1996, the government said, yeah, these tech companies back then, when they're little itty bitties, that makes sense, right? And it probably did at the time. But now today, fast forward, it's an everyday interwoven piece into the fabric of our society, and is basically shaping the way that we live our lives. Now that's a big deal, because social media companies aren't going to have to make corrections because they don't need to. They're not held liable. I can't go and sue Meta right now for $200 or $300 million for the loss of my son, because they facilitated a criminal activity on their platforms and continue to do so with no action. And until that happens, they will never make changes. And legislatively, it's so impossible to make simple changes because there's so much money, especially lobbyists that are for technology companies. It's almost impossible to get bills through. So kind of the other piece of what I'm doing, the awareness stuff that we spoke about earlier, and speaking and traveling, and doing a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of media. I'm doing a press conference in Lansing, Michigan tomorrow for some Michigan legislation we're doing. I'm going to LA in a week. I'm going to London in 3 weeks. So I'm doing a lot of events and just trying to get the word out there as far as I can. That's just one piece, right? The other piece is legislative change. And that's some things that I've been spending some time in DC doing, working with some nonprofit groups that are really trying to protect young people, not only for sextortion, but for trafficking and fentanyl and choking challenges and all these other things that are happening online. But the least common denominator is social media changes. I was in DC with at the congressional hearing when all those 5 CEOs from Meta, Mark Zuckerberg was there, Discord was there, Snapchat was there, TikTok was there, and they were getting hammered by our senators. And we as parents, there was 24 parents with dead children holding our pictures of our dead loved ones from their platforms, sitting in that room. And there was some legislation. There was 4 or 5 bills on the table, bipartisan, 100% voted by Republicans and Democrats in the committee, and not a single one of them is a law today. And that was it was 9 months ago, more than 9 months ago. I was in that hearing. So when we're trying to get things changed, it's the wheels of justice grind very slowly, and legislative things are just they're almost mute. And a lot of these bills are just basically simple bills, like the SHIELD Act, or like COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, which is the most popular one. Really basic stuff. It's telling social media companies they have to produce accurate data when we request it, so we can decide what's happened, what's not. Little things like that. It's the little bit of accountability. And we can't get simple stuff passed. So I don't have a lot of faith in the legislative side, even though I'm pushing really hard and I'm spending a lot of time doing it. It's like beating a really old drum that just isn't sounding well, but we all have to do it. And there's so many people in the fight, and we have to keep up and keep our head up and try. Eventually it will push. But I think the biggest thing is Section 230, which is that piece that protects the social media companies from the liability, because that is where the change is going to be made. For example, the 13-year-olds that can get a Facebook page, and you had mentioned that Instagram had pulled down, well, you were talking about Instagram
They privatize
changing
teen
the
accounts.
private.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
And,
heard
and we
that.
can talk about that in a minute, but they actually, a few months ago, they went out and they scrubbed 63,000 fake accounts basically off their platform, which on paper in a news or
Mm.
press release looks really good, right? Well, that's a nothing burger. 63,000 accounts. It's not, they could do 63 million probably. So,
Mhm.
the point of it is that Meta and any social media company really has the technology already available to know when a teenager is 13 or not. Because Meta specifically, they have so much data. So my 10-year-old, they know my 10-year-old is a Marquette. They know my 10-year-old is going to fifth grade. They know that I'm the dad and Jess is the mom and all these things because of all of our accounts. So there's so much cross-reference data. So when Harper, my daughter, tries to go and gets a Facebook account when she's 10 and lies and says she's 13, the technology is there to know that she's lying.
Mhm.
And that account could easily be flagged and shipped off into another file where a human being could pull it up, do a little surface level research and see if it's accurate or not. So when the social media companies say, well, we can't put age restrictions on our platforms because we don't know how many, we don't know how old these kids are and they're going to lie anyway. So that's false because they know how old these kids are by simple algorithm and programming. Basically, it's not even human, it's all programming. So that technology is
Frustrating.
there, so they just choose not to use it, right? Because they don't want to, because they want 10 and 11-year-olds on their platform. They
Mhm.
want them as early as possible. Why? Because they've been sending internal emails that we all have access to now saying that we need to get younger users going. So
Oh my
it's
gosh.
being, and they just have no,
Mm.
they have no liability. And so I think what needs to happen is section 230 needs to be deleted, and they just need to take it down. And the
Mm.
tech companies say we can't do that, we'd get sued, and businesses would go under and all these things. And my answer to that is, if your business is above board, I own a real estate company. If my real estate company is not above board, then they're going to sue me. And I've
Mhm.
never been sued, and I've never paid any money. I've been in business 17 years and I'm doing just fine. If your business is so above board, Mark Zuckerberg, then why are you so worried about having protection that's going to keep you from getting sued? And
Mhm.
so they don't have an answer to that. And that's the reality of it. If they would just do the things they're supposed to do and make valiant efforts to protect our children on their platforms, even if they did get sued, they would put their ties on, confidently walk into a courtroom and win every single time. And they would never have to worry
Right.
about it. But they wouldn't. I would sue them for $200 or $300 million. And so would the 30 other parents of sextortion and the 40 other fentanyl death parents and everybody else. There'd be thousands of lawsuits, millions of lawsuits probably. And they would go under because they were being negligent in their operations.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, what needs to happen is some sort of fissure that goes into section 230 that allows lawsuits to be filed. And
Mhm.
until that happens, Facebook or Meta or Snapchat or any of them are never going to make
They're
any
never
changes
gonna
because they do
change.
not have to. Their
Yeah.
only way they're going to make changes is by losing a ton of money and or legislatively. And I think the fastest way is civil suits because they will get settled. They would never ever want to have to sit in discovery in a court for any of the cases because it would explode their internal workings, and that would just perpetuate more lawsuits.
Mhm.
So these cases would get settled immediately. They would make changes immediately. All those technology pieces that they have built ready to go, they would dust them off the shelf, implement them in, and it would literally be change overnight.
Mm.
So section 230 is the key in my opinion, and that's where I'm targeting a lot of
It's
my
good.
time and my effort and education, because that's where the change is going to happen. Legislatively is great, and I think there's a lot of room there, and I think that needs to happen. But if we have change with 230, if we have change legislatively, and we have a good awareness campaign, I think we could get social media to a safe place, to a manageable level. We're never going to stop all the crime, but I think we could get it to a tolerable level where citizens, at least in this country, would be comfortable with.
Mm. Oh, there's so much. I
It's
was like
So
so deep.
thinking
much.
about what I want to
So
respond.
Yeah.
deep.
Well, it's just
Yeah.
like, and these companies have the data when it serves them, you know,
Correct.
and like you're saying, it's like the money, them having that ability to be sued. I think that that's really smart to go that route because that is how, because like you're saying, they have the ability to make the changes, but they're not doing it because they
They don't
absolutely,
have to.
it's working for them right now.
Right.
So thank you for all of that. You really put that so well. And I would love for you to share, to just when you're speaking, I guess, with and I know we're kind of probably about our time. I want to be respectful of the hour that we have, but I
Fine.
guess
I
too,
got all
just
day.
like, oh, John, you're great.
I have to travel today, so as soon as I'm done with this, I got to go down to
Okay,
Lansing.
okay.
So I'm good. I got all day. So
Okay, thank you. I guess I would love to hear more when you're speaking. You spoke a lot about like reminders for parents, but when kids maybe like what like a kid like Jordan
mhm.
um who is in this experience and it's just everything's getting amped and maybe sharing like why do you think that they would be so unable to get help, and then what would you want to say to them if that makes sense? I'm just trying to think
Yeah.
like it's so easy to think, yeah, like why did like you're saying like as an adult it'd be easy to be like, okay, that's a blip, but yeah, maybe expand on that a little bit more of like why these kids are just caving to this.
Yeah, and I don't know. There's adults that are a victim of this too.
Mhm.
Unfortunately,
Right.
lots of adults that are a victim of this too. I met a woman in Las Vegas at a conference I was at, and her mother was romance scammed of 1.4 million, ended up dead in a river. And
Oh.
so, it's so different. It has so many different tentacles, and so
Mhm.
adults get wrapped up into these things all the time. Um, and that's what I try to tell young people. It's like we don't expect you, certainly you, to understand how and why and all these things, but what we want to do is try to give them some tools to be a little more prepared. And
Mhm.
I will share with you, 2 weeks after my son died, a young man's father from a town 10 minutes from here um, call or message me and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that thinking about you guys, and I found out the other day that my son got wrapped up in this too, and he sent money. Thank the Lord he came to me." But this young man was Jordan's age. He played at a rival school. They played basketball together. They were friends. They knew
Mm.
each other. I believe that young man went to my son's funeral. That young man
Wow.
knew Jordan was extorted. He knew how he was extorted. It was all over public. I mean, it was the buzz of the town for months. So everybody knew exactly what happened to Jordan and why and how it came about, how he was victimized, how he was tortured, pictures, everything. This young man knew it all. And you know what? He still did it 2 weeks after Jordan died.
Mm.
Thankfully, he was just mentally together where he just said, "Dad, I screwed up," and went to his dad. And I wish I had had that too.
Right.
But so this happens, and I get those stories all the time from people, and that's kind of in the beginning when we realize that this is such a problem that we have to let people know. So what I tell young people is just that. It's like, we don't expect you to understand, but watch out for this stuff. This is what it looks like, and really try to put into perspective that social media is just really a bunch of lies. Honestly, even the good stuff that's
Mm.
posted on there is usually just not truthful 100%. So use social media with a grain of salt. You got to look out the window and breathe air and talk to people and be
Mm.
interactive to really understand life. And but if you end up in a situation and there are people will, you need to just recognize it. If you send money or you send a picture, don't worry about it. You just need to stop, talk to somebody you trust, even if it's a friend. Try to get some good advice from a good friend, stay in communication with them. But I would encourage you to talk to an adult and talk to law enforcement right away, because a lot of these cases, like I said, Jordan's $300 case that, if Jordan was still here today, would have been a nothing burger. But that $300 case turned into, 11 indictments, extraditions, money laundering, almost 200 grand. I mean, these cases were huge. And so that's the thing I try to tell law enforcement is like, if that would have walked into my door when I was a police officer, that's what would have happened. It would have been, oh, it's a $300 thing. It's probably overseas. Did you learn your lesson? Quit being an idiot, move on. Statistic gets reported and we go back to the street, right? But the good cops that have some time and have the resources in the departments that can take that and say, I wonder if we can run with this,
Mm.
and grab onto it, latch onto something, see if there's something there. Or if we have suicides that are like Jordan's that were just completely from out of the blue, it might be a situation where we need to dig a little deeper and work a little harder.
Mm.
Um, so
Mhm.
again, for young people, the best thing you can do is to stop communicating, contact an adult, contact law enforcement right away. And there's what's called ICAC. It's a International Crimes Against Children. It's an organization that's embedded into most police departments and sheriff's departments, and they have these ICAC detectives, and they specialize in cybercrime.
Mm.
They're very well read. They have great technology. They're on top of this stuff, and they know exactly what it is. So I would recommend, if you can remember, is when you contact your local police department to report it, ask for the ICAC detective and tell them what happened, because they are going to know what's happening. They have all the resources for you. They're going to be well known. If you just call the 911 and get an officer there, they'll take the report. They may forward it to the ICAC detective, most likely if they have one. But if you can talk to the ICAC detective right away, do that. You know, just leave your account alone. You can block it and then move on and just move on with your day. But most likely, even if you sent a picture, a couple things. One, they're most likely not going to share it, because they lose their leverage. If you sent them a picture and you block them and you contact law enforcement, most likely you'll never revisit that again. These extortionists will put that away and move on to the next person that's biting and start concentrating on them, especially if you've already blocked them and don't have access to you anymore. If you don't block them, they could come back. A lot of the sextortion victims are being sextorted for months and months. They send money, they go away, and then 3 weeks later they come back again. And then you send them one more money and they come back. So best to just block them and move on and report it. And then there's also things like NCMEC's Take It Down. So right on their website, it's takeitdown.org, I believe, through National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And if you do send a photo, you can enter the address of the photo that you sent into that platform, and it will go out to all the participating websites and social media sites and actually remove the picture from the internet. And it does work. I've gotten some mixed reviews about it, but it's something defensively that I think young people should know about, a little bit of a peace of mind, that said, hey, I did send this picture, I blocked them. I don't know if they sent to anybody, but time is of the essence there. So as the picture gets distributed online, the further it goes, the harder it may be to retract. But if you can get on it right away, you have a better chance of making sure that picture doesn't land on a bunch of websites that you can't have access to. So I think those are probably the biggest things that people know, and just reassure them this is not your fault. And when you're talking to law enforcement, you're not going to be charged with any crimes. Some law enforcement agencies aren't up to speed with that. I've had some bad experiences with parents saying that the law enforcement were telling them if they filed the report, they could be charged with child sexual material on their computer, and that's a crime and different things. So I want to make sure that the kids and the parents also understand that that is not the case. Most departments are a little bit more abreast with this type of thing and are more experienced, and you won't get that. But there are some smaller departments and stuff that may still be kind of pushing that narrative a little bit. But if that's what you're getting from a department, move on to another, call the FBI.
Would you say with that, I'm just curious for like my learning, if there is something that you are aware of as a parent and you don't do anything about it, is that like you probably want to do something within, a few hours, I would guess? Or how do police look at that? Like if you've just sat on something for a few weeks and you had this material?
I don't know that it matters a lot,
Okay.
only because, we have to put the caseload in perspective too. There's only so many FBI agents, and only a few of them are working these extortion cases, and they're in NCMEC and federal agencies are getting thousands of tips a week of these types of things. So they have to triage this stuff. So if Jordan was still here today and we called them and filed the report, it's a $300 loss. Like I said, I'd probably go as a statistic, we'd move on, because they're working on cases of suicide. They're working on cases where people lost $1.4 million, so they have to take the case in priority and triage them. So, but I always tell people Jordan's $300 case, whether he's here or not, could have been the key piece to another investigation that was never put together until now, until you reported it. So it's always there on the side of just reporting it. It just takes a little bit of time. And more importantly, when we're trying to push for legislative changes and we're trying to make really major changes to social media companies, like repealing Section 230, the senators and the mayors and the politicians and the staffers, they're going on looking at statistics and what people are saying. And so those statistics help in the broader sense, you know. So when they go and report it, they're just, nobody's getting the accurate number. And I'm guessing at this point, even as open as this thing has become in the last few years, I still think we're less than 10% reporting, because it's such a very sensitive subject, and it's embarrassing materials, and people are just like, I can't tell you how many people reach out to me from all over the world that said, hey, I really appreciate you being a voice. This happened to us, or it happened to me, or happened to my son or daughter, and we've never said anything to anybody. Please don't say anything. I get that all the time, because parents, especially, or kids, don't want anybody to know what's happening. You know, and so that's the problem. It's always swept under the rug all the time.
I think we need to remove the stigma and the shame around it, because it's so
Correct.
common. And I even remember, for me, like when I was growing up, and I was not dealing with this. I mean, I think it was like emerging when I was probably like 15, 16, like the smartphone kind of came out. But, you know, thankfully I wasn't. But my dad said this when I was really dealing with depression. He was like, this, you think this is going to be forever, and it's like your life is over, and it's not.
Yeah.
You know, that
Right.
there is hope. And so I even feel like that's just a really powerful reminder for kids that think that the immediate future, this is all I have. Like Jordan was feeling that way. It's like, my life's over. And there is so much more life for him to live, you know,
Yeah.
beyond that.
Right.
And I think that that is such a lie that kids believe, and
Yeah.
adults believe, that it's
Yeah.
like, wow, this is all this shame, all of this feeling, preventing them from getting help.
Yeah, it's a really hard thing too, and that really kind of stabs to the heart of American mental health issues. And personally, I think a lot of it falls on the shoulders of some of the therapists and stuff that aren't doing a really good job of telling young people, especially, it's like, you're not depressed. This is normal for you. This is what normal people go through. It's okay, and it's very much it's okay to feel. You're supposed to feel like this. That was a bad thing that happened to you. You know, your girlfriend of 4 years broke up with you, and you know, this is horrible. You should feel this is normal. And instead we're saying, oh my gosh, and then here's some medications, and here's
Yeah.
this. And so I think the mental health the arena, in my opinion, is not doing any good service to our country at all in that sense, and could be way better. But that's a fight I'm not into, and I'm sure somebody else will have it someday. But that's what I'm seeing. I saw, you know, law enforcement 15 17 years ago, when I was in a long time now. It just wasn't there wasn't enough backbone to just say, hey, this isn't what your life is going to be. You're a strong person, and this is normal for you, and it's okay, you know, and take that stigma. And instead we're too busy dishing out, you know, emotional support animal stuff for tenants because they want to have a dog, and all the things that are happening back, you know. It's just, there's too much of that nonsense. So, but whole other thing for another day. But you know, we're just doing what we can do to at least hold businesses accountable, and to educate people on what's actually happening, and making people aware. So
Yeah. Well, John, thank you so much. Did you have any other questions or anything?
I did wonder, is there an active campaign happening for the repeal of Section 230?
I yeah, I guess the short answer is yes. There's a lot of organizations. There's several senators and congress people who are really pushing for that. But that's such a big issue. That would be colossal if that ever got removed. And I don't ever see it happen. I could see some changes to it. Um, and there's some different ways of doing it. So I don't know
Adding
if
language
that'll
like the lawsuits, like you were saying, maybe.
yeah, you know, there's, you know, simple things like having it retroactive. So if they sunsetted Section 230 today, would parents like myself who were victimized 2 years ago be able to file back lawsuits? You know, that's a big deal versus just chopping the head off the snake and going forward today, making changes, and then letting that play out. So there's it's a lot of negotiating in politics, of course. And so but love to see it someday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I feel like there's a lot of action steps that you mentioned that I really appreciated. And I just wanted to mention too that we do have a program called Fierce Parenting, and it's a free program for parents. And we do talk about sextortion and sexting. And I think that could be helpful for parents. But really appreciate this conversation with you, John. Like I learned so much, and just because it is a complex, so multi-pronged issue, and I just really appreciate this. And I just think it's going to be such a benefit to our listeners. So thank you so
Yeah,
much for
good.
joining us.
Yeah, I hope we
Thank
can make
you
a
for
difference to at
sharing
least
your
one
heart.
person. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say quickly, what are you working on now? Like you said, you're traveling a lot, and what's on the horizon? Anything exciting to share?
Hopefully some slowing down. Honestly, I've just been doing a
Yeah.
lot in the last few months, and I've been in Atlanta, Las Vegas, and DC, and Lansing. We're going to LA, London, tons of
Wow.
podcasts, Nancy Gray show, media stuff, and so everyone is so supportive, and we're getting so much feedback. And every time I do something like this, your listeners are going to reach out and share a story, or and uh, it's so impactful. I had a mother reach out a few months ago now, and she saw me on Fox News like last year sometime. And at the time, she sat three teenage boys, sat them down. She's in Colorado or something. Said, "Hey, this young guy in Michigan has happened, and I just want to let you know I saw this guy in the news, and I thought it was important." And so, fast forward, like I don't know, this was just a couple months ago. She said, "Hey, my youngest son came downstairs, freaked out, and said, 'Hey, you remember that young man in Michigan that you told me about, that football player that died?'" And she's like, "Yeah." And he said, "That's happening to me right now."
Oh my
So
goodness.
it's stories like that. It's like, that might have saved that young kid's life. I don't know, but
Absolutely.
mom was ecstatic. Like,
Mm,
she's just putting herself in my shoes. We've lost a child over this. And then, she was able to share that tragedy with her son, and then have that piece that I didn't get, where
mhm,
that young guy came downstairs, strong and with courage, and said, "Hey, I
mm,
screwed up, mom." And, I took a phone call 2 days ago from a podcast that I did 3 months ago. Her sister, her nephew was being sextorted. She's like, "I know a guy, we got to talk to him." They literally called me up as it was going on. So what do we do? So I walked him through the steps and had him contact ICAC, and I followed up with him the other day, and everybody's great. Son's a little bit in the dirt, but he's safe, and he was strong, and the family's
mm.
healing. And so
My
that's what we
goodness.
want, and that's what keeps me going. So yeah, I'm running a
Mm.
business and trying to have life and get soccer practice and dance practice. I have a
Being a
soccer tournament in
dad.
southern Wisconsin, and my other daughter's in competitive gymnastics, and so we were in travel baseball, and so we're just all over, just the
Yeah.
middle class family, just trying to get it done, and do it right. And this is just another piece. And I don't get to have, my son had been 20, this summer to turn 20, and I don't get to go and set up his apartment and stop over and have dinner and buy him groceries and
Mm,
visit and stuff. So this is my time that I get to essentially be with him, and carry a huge weight, and try to help other families, because I really think we're making a big difference doing it. So
mhm.
You are.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for
yeah,
thank you for doing what you do. And his legacy just does. It lives on. So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Ah, no, we're honored. We're honored that you join us. So
Yeah,
just God bless you and everything that you're doing.
yeah.
And thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And yeah, this is just going to be so beneficial for our listeners. So
And where are you guys out of again?
we're in Eau Claire.
Oh,
So
Claire. Okay, yeah. Mhm.
I really hope we can get you at one of our conferences, but I know you're
Yeah.
very
Yeah,
busy. So
I'm always willing to do it. So
I'd love that. So
just got to put
we'll
me up
stay
for
in
a night in a
touch.
hotel. Yeah.
You're going to ask him for his address.
Oh, I was going to. Yeah, you can email that over for the check, because I want to send you that as
You're not
well.
sending me a check.
Um I would like to,
No.
because I feel like you're telling your story, and
No,
it's for survivors and parents of survivors that we really want to do that for. So I can email that.
I don't like
Um
that.
well, okay, I'm going to stop recording. Sorry.